Welcome to this review slash retrospective for the video game Call of Cthulhu Shadow of the Comet. And one of the things you'll see here in the background is I have the opening sequence and the first day, as it were, of the game, where I just went back to it and recorded everything again after my playthrough, so I would just have some visual representation for what the game has on offer. And yeah, at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and give you my thoughts about the game. And I'll just start with all the positive comments for starters, which I normally do. And I will say that this game came out in 1993. And honestly, I think from a graphical and musical perspective, this game is actually really good for that time period. And even to this day, I think it definitely is still a good game. It has a definitely a certain charm to it with the art style and the graphical, everything basically. And it looks really good. I enjoyed it. I can't really say any complaints pretty much at all for the graphical style of the game. I thought it was actually really good. And the music for the game is actually surprisingly good. I thought that the music, which was actually there for pretty much most sections of the game. There were a couple of areas where it was pretty quiet and you just had some sound effects, most noticeably the forest. A lot of times didn't have any music going, but I felt like the music in the game definitely helped to set the tone very well and is actually quite catchy. And even now I can still just have those tunes in my head, but very evocative, the music in this game. Definitely made you have a sense of dread and things going on in the town of Ilsmouth that you're just wondering what's going to happen next. And that's one thing I want to say about this game for certain is one of the best aspects of this game truly is the atmosphere. It's a very atmospheric game. The story is actually, in my opinion, really good. Well done all the way around. So this game does have quite a lot going for it. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the negative aspects of the game, of which unfortunately there are quite a few. Now, this is a game that I would probably classify as fairly guide heavy. I sat here and I tried to figure out a lot of the puzzles in the game on my own without any use of a guide, if at all possible. But there were just some times in this game where I had no idea what I was supposed to do. And there was some indication for where you're supposed to go next in your notebook, basically. But at the same time, there's also not a lot of guidance for what the next step should be. I mean, like in the very first day, for instance, I got lost saying, what am I supposed to do? And I had no clue that I had to go back to my room to pick up my stuff that I wasn't able to pick up at the beginning of the day, which is a really odd thing. So there are plenty of times in the game where I got stuck just figuring out what am I supposed to be doing here. And the interface to the game, it felt like it worked a little bit better when I was just using just the keyboard for the most part. But then at the same time, using just the keyboard was also very slow to pick items up. Whereas I could right click on my mouse and right click and pick things up a little more quickly. So both styles of keyboard or just mouse, both of them had their pros and cons. For the most part, I felt like I would want to use the keyboard mostly for the majority of the game. Definitely moving around was much better with the keyboard rather than the mouse, and moving it around and pointing the arrow in the direction you want to go. I just felt like the keyboard just worked so much better. But I felt like the mouse was better for picking objects up It was better for progressing dialogue, because it felt like if you hit enter on the keyboard, it would skip dialogue sections, and that was a little bit annoying, to say the least. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm watching all this stuff in the background here. I think another positive positive, maybe neutral, the voice acting. I thought the voice acting, for the most part, in the game was actually pretty good. There were a couple people that, what would be the best way of describing it, were a bit monotone in their delivery of their lines, basically. But for the most part, I felt like the voice actors for this game did a really good job. Now, to be fair, this version of the game was the CD-ROM version. And now I bought this on GOG, but I know it's available on Steam as well. And on GOG, you have an option to play either the CD-ROM version or you can download the floppy disk version. Having said that, I'm not really sure why you would want to play the floppy disk version, unless you just really don't like the voice acting. But I thought the voice acting was actually pretty well done, in my personal opinion. And the actors did a good job. I'm not going to say they did a stellar job, like that it's the greatest voice acting of all time, but it was good. It was, and more than passable. It was a good effort on their part, for certain. But, you know, going back to the negatives, I will say the interface, the best way of describing it is the interface would get in the way many times in this game, and that would make it difficult to progress. Lack of any clues for where you're supposed to go next, that was something that happened quite a bit. And the thing is like, there's just certain aspects to the game that, you know, it would have made a lot more sense if you had certain actions you could do, basically, like trying to open a door. Like, just the action of trying to open something wasn't there. And so a lot of times I'd be sitting around trying to go to places, say, can I open this door? Can I go here? No. And there's just nothing you can do. And it's very cryptic, to say the least. And the puzzles, now some of them, like I said, I was able to figure out some of the puzzles and things like that in the game. So I was able to do that on my own to a certain extent. But then there were other puzzles that were just like mind-numbingly, like, how was I supposed to figure this out? One thing I'll say, there's a very puzzle at the very beginning of the second day where you're supposed to be developing film. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I have the advantage of being able to look up on the internet what chemicals are involved with developing film. This game came out in 1993, and a lot of people, myself included, did not have access to the internet. So I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, if I was trying to play this back in 1993, how exactly am I going to figure this puzzle out? I'm going to drive down to my local library and look something up in the encyclopedias or something? Bit of an odd choice. And I will say the one puzzle that really got on my nerves the most was a little slider puzzle right there close to the very end of the game. And my goodness, that freaking puzzle. I mean, I spent a good amount of time trying to figure it out without trying to use a guide or anything. And I got really dang close. It was just, I think there was like 2 tiles. They needed to flip, and I couldn't figure out any way of getting them to flip. And at the end of the day, it was all of just 6 movements needed to get the whole thing to line up. But it's one of those puzzles, like, if you start moving things too much, there's just no way to roll back to where you were, and you'll get stuck. And I spent a long time on that stupid puzzle. That one really upset me, to say the least. In fact, it would get to the point where certain times in the game it was like, okay, after about 30 minutes or so, if I can't figure out what the next step was, I'm just going to break out the guide and figure out where to go. And I had to do that a decent bit of times. I want to say roughly about half of the puzzles of the game I was able to figure out, maybe a little less than half possibly. But there was definitely some things that were just not very obvious at all. And it's a bit of a shame, really, because I think the obtuseness of some of the puzzles, the crypticness of some of them, and the interface just kind of getting in the way, that really does detract from how good of a game this could have been. Because outside of those things, it was a really good game, but it did get to be a little bit frustrating at times, and you would be like, I have no idea what the next step is. And that happened to me more times than I can, tell you. But overall, I still think this is a good game. It's a good but flawed game, to say the least. If you're a fan of anything from H.P. Lovecraft, Lovecraft type stories, or just any horror stories in general, this game is actually really good about that. Beautiful atmosphere. I just love the atmosphere. I loved everything about it from a story perspective. I thought it was great. Now, I will say this, actually. The death scenes, and in my playthrough, I tried to leave a lot of the death scenes in there because sometimes there were some pretty corny ways of dying. Really, I'm like, really? That kills me? Okay, sure, whatever. They weren't very graphic for the most part. The only area that I can really think of that was somewhat graphic would be the Jonas Hambleton's house, where you're trying to figure that little puzzle out. There was a couple things that were, I'd say, minorly graphic in nature. But to be fair, I mean, you can just look at the stuff on the screen. It's not like there's a huge amount of gore or anything here that would really upset people. So, for the most part, I think this is a good game for a lot of different people. Most ages. I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend this for people that are not a teenager, basically. But anybody teens and up, I think this is a good game. And especially for this time of year, around Halloween, this game is definitely worth a go. Like a lot of these adventure games back in the day, once you know the hints, the what the next step is, for you to replay the game is much quicker. I mean, me just doing this background video here, for instance, I was able to go through it very quickly with the first day. I think probably less than an hour to get through the first day. So from that perspective, it's a decent game from a replayability perspective. But there's not really a lot of replayability there to it, because it seems like all the solutions are pretty much the same. You're not going to have alternative paths you can take, as it were. Maybe you go back and hit a few things that you may have missed, like I didn't come in here initially my first time around. But for the most part, it's going to be the same story beats on a replay. Is it worth replaying? Possibly. But you're not going to get alternative endings or anything like that. So I would keep that in mind. Very low replayability value, but if you really enjoy it, perhaps it does have some replayability there. But overall, I think if I was going to give this game a score, I don't want to be too harsh on it. The interface and the puzzles do hurt it quite a bit, but I do feel like the positives do bring it up quite a bit. So I'll give it a fairly average score, maybe slightly above average. Well, I think it's more of an average score of 70%. I was kind of debating, would I do 70% or 65% for this game? And honestly, I did have a good time with it. as far as adventure games go, it's still a pretty fun time. And like I said, just the atmosphere and story alone really did it for me. I liked it a lot. So I would say definitely worth a playthrough if you're a fan of adventure games, horror stories, Lovecraft, anything along those lines. You probably do deserve or need to give this game a try. It's pretty cheap. I don't think I paid a lot for it, and knowing me and how cheap of a person I am, I probably got it for sale for really low amount of money, and these things go on sale all the time. No, you can get on GOG. I think you can get it on Steam as well. I don't know what other platforms it would be available on, but it's definitely worth it. I will say that the DOSBox implementation that they had set up on GOG was also quite flawless. I didn't have to do really any tinkering whatsoever with it to get it running well. It was just right out of the box. Worked very good. Now, I did leave it with the overlay for the graphics options. I didn't try to do anything like OpenGL, DirectX, anything like that. I think I did 3 times high quality or something. So I didn't put any like major filters or anything of that nature. I just said, run it at 1080p, and we'll just leave it at 4:3 for the aspect ratio. And I think it looks great like that. Now, had I probably done 16:9 for like widescreen, it might have distorted the imagery, and that might have made things look a little bit off. So I would just, from a configuration perspective, I just say keep it with the old 4:3 aspect ratio. But other than that, very minimal configuration required on your part to get it up and running. So that was really good. Now, I will put a couple of links in the description for the video for a couple of websites that I followed to help me out with the guides. The first one is more of like a blog, and they have multiple entries on that blog that I really did use that guide the most. The second guide is probably pretty good and would have just been just as helpful, but the main thing that I used there was for the solution for that stupid sliding puzzle, which was really annoying. And that was another thing I would say that might slightly hurt this game. It wasn't too often that I had a crash. I think I've only had one crash really, but there was one area of the game where it really bugged out on me, got to the point where I couldn't do anything, and I actually, in my mind, I was doing what I was supposed to do, but I actually wasted a lot of time trying to solve a puzzle that bugged out on me. And it didn't happen too often, but when it does happen, it can be very frustrating. So another reason why I would say this game's about a 70%. From a stability perspective, it's not too bad. It's pretty decent, actually, but it's not perfect. So that's another aspect to mention as well. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the game Shadow of the Comet. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.